For 700 years, one coin dominated the known world. Merchants from the misty forests of Russia to the spice ports of Sri Lanka accepted it without a second thought. It was the Byzantine solidus, and with a gold purity that rarely dipped below 95%, it earned a title that speaks volumes, the dollar of the Middle Ages. But after 7 centuries of unwavering trust, its credibility vanished in less than one. This isn't just a story about ancient gold. It's a timeless lesson on the fragility of economic power, with a hidden warning for the currencies we trust today. The story of the solidus is the story of a promise. For generation after generation, the image of the Byzantine emperor on that coin was a guarantee. It meant that the gold in your hand was real, pure, and would be accepted anywhere from the markets of Venice to the trade routes of the Silk Road. This trust wasn't accidental. It was the bedrock of Byzantine influence. While armies and borders shifted, the solidus was constant, a financial anchor in a turbulent world. It financed empires, built cathedrals, and paid for the silks and spices that flowed between East and West. This was the world's first true reserve currency. But what happens when the promise is broken? Watch till the end for a shocking discovery on why reserve currencies, symbols of stability, ultimately die. The Byzantine Empire by the 11th century was facing a crisis it couldn't fight its way out of. Years of constant warfare, a shrinking tax base from lost territories, and devastating plagues had hollowed out the treasury. The emperors in Constantinople were trapped. They faced 3 impossible choices. They could raise taxes on a population already stretched to its breaking point. They could borrow vast sums of money they knew they could never repay, or they could choose the silent, insidious path of debasement. They chose debasement. In this video, we're going to break down the stunning collapse of the world's most trusted currency. We'll explore the 700-year reign of the solidus, from its creation as the backbone of an empire to its undisputed status as the world's money. We'll pinpoint the 80-year period of rapid debasement, where its gold content plummeted from a reliable 95% to a worthless 33%. We'll see how the infamous Fourth Crusade, which saw Christian knights sack the Christian capital of Constantinople, delivered the final, fatal blow to a currency already on life support. Then we'll examine how the rising merchant powers of Venice and Florence stepped into the vacuum, creating their own gold coins to replace the disgraced solidus. Finally, we'll lay out the timeline, revealing how the financial collapse of the empire began centuries before its final political fall. It took 700 years to build that credibility, but less than a century to destroy it. That is the precarious nature of being the world's reserve currency. The reign of the solidus began long before the Middle Ages, with the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great in the 4th century. He needed a stable, reliable coin to unify his vast empire, and the solidus was his answer. Each coin was struck with a consistent 4.5 grams of nearly pure gold. For centuries, this standard was jealously guarded. Emperors understood that the coin's integrity was a direct reflection of their own power and the empire's stability. To hold a solidus was to hold a piece of Roman, and later Byzantine, prestige. It was more than money. It was a propaganda tool, a projection of imperial might that traveled further than any legion ever could. This unwavering commitment to purity built a foundation of trust that spanned continents. A merchant in Alexandria didn't need to know the current emperor's name. He just needed to see the familiar gleam of a solidus. Its reputation was so strong that foreign rulers began minting their own imitations, hoping to borrow some of its credibility. For 700 years, this financial dominance was unshaken. The solidus was the standard by which all other wealth was measured, the financial sun around which the economic world revolved. The beginning of the end started not with a bang, but with a whisper. Around the year 1040, the empire was in dire straits. The treasury was empty and the enemies were at the gates. The emperor, Michael IV, made a fateful decision. He began to secretly reduce the amount of gold in the solidus, mixing it with cheaper metals like silver and copper. At first, the change was almost imperceptible. The coins looked and felt the same. This new, lighter version was called the tetarteron nomisma, while the old, pure version was the histamenon nomisma. But the state paid its bills and its soldiers with the debased coins while demanding taxes be paid in the pure ones. It was a classic bait and switch. This deception created a currency crisis. People weren't fools. They quickly learned to distinguish between the good money and the bad money. Gresham's law took effect. Bad money drives out good. Citizens hoarded the pure gold coins, while the debased ones were passed around as quickly as possible. This was the first crack in the foundation. Over the next few decades, a succession of emperors accelerated the process. Each new crisis, each new military campaign, was an excuse to further dilute the gold. By the 1070s, under Emperor Michael VII, the coin's value had collapsed so dramatically that he earned the nickname parapanax, meaning minus a quarter, because a bushel of wheat that once cost 1 solidus now cost 1 1/4. The debasement was no longer a secret. It was a public scandal. In just 80 years, from the 1040s to the 1204s, the gold content of the coin plummeted from over 95% to a pitiful 33%. The promise was broken. The final nail in the coffin came from the unlikeliest of sources: a Christian army. In 1204, the Knights of the Fourth Crusade, originally destined for the Holy Land, were diverted to Constantinople. Driven by a toxic mix of greed and political manipulation by their Venetian allies, they turned on the world's greatest Christian city. For 3 days, they sacked Constantinople, looting its treasures, desecrating its churches, and shattering the last vestiges of Byzantine power. This was more than a military defeat. It was a psychological and economic catastrophe. The sack of Constantinople broadcast a clear message to the world. The Byzantine Empire was broken. Its government was in exile, its capital was occupied, and its currency was worthless. International merchants, who had already grown wary of the debased solidus, now abandoned it completely. Why trust the coin of a failed state? The sacking didn't cause the currency's collapse. That had been happening for decades. But it was the public, undeniable confirmation of its death. The credibility, built over 7 centuries, was officially gone. The economic heart of the empire had stopped beating long before the final political body fell. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does international finance. With the solidus disgraced, the world needed a new, reliable currency. The powerhouses of this new era were not empires, but city-states built on trade. Venice, the maritime republic that had masterfully orchestrated the Fourth Crusade for its own benefit, was perfectly positioned to take over. In 1284, Venice introduced the ducat. Learning the lesson of the solidus, the Venetians made a new promise. Their coin would be struck from 99.47% pure gold, a standard they would maintain for over 500 years. The ducat was an instant success, becoming the new currency of choice for Mediterranean trade. At the same time, another Italian city-state, Florence, was experiencing its own economic boom, fueled by banking and textiles. In 1252, even before the ducat, Florence had introduced its own pure gold coin, the florin. Like the ducat, the florin's purity was its bond. These 2 coins, the ducat and the florin, became the new pillars of global commerce. The economic center of the world had shifted from the imperial capital of Constantinople to the bustling ports and banking houses of Italy. The Byzantine Empire had squandered its greatest economic weapon, and its savviest rivals were all too happy to pick it up. When you look at the timeline, the most startling fact is how long the fall took. The financial collapse began around 1040. The final, irreversible political collapse of the Byzantine Empire didn't happen until the Ottoman conquest in 1453. That is a 400-year gap. The empire was a hollow shell for centuries. a zombie state shuffling towards its inevitable demise long after its economic vitality had been drained away. It had prestige, history, and a powerful brand, but its foundations had been eroded by poor financial decisions. The debasement of the solidus was not a symptom of the empire's decline, it was a primary cause. It created internal chaos, destroyed international faith, and funded the short-term survival of the state by guaranteeing its long-term irrelevance. The story of the solidus is a stark reminder that reserve currency status is not a birthright. It is earned over centuries through trust and discipline, but it can be lost in a generation through expediency and short-sightedness. The Byzantine emperors thought they had found a clever way to solve their problems, printing money out of thin air by debasing their gold. But what they were actually doing was destroying the very trust that underpinned their global power. They chose the easy path, and in doing so, they sealed their empire's fate. 700 years of credibility, gone in 80. It's a powerful lesson from history, showing us that the foundation of any great power is not just its armies, but the promise it keeps with the world. And that is a warning that echoes even today. Thank you for watching this video. If you like this content, consider subscribing to this channel for more financial mysteries around the world.